Have Pokemon games gotten easier? Now, this is a philosophical Pokemon gaming question that has been floating around various different platforms focused on Pokemon gaming for a while now, and in this video I hope to answer the question with justification and reasoning. So where does this question come from? Well, it comes from this idea that the older generation of Pokemon games had less hand-holding, lower quality of life and more barriers to success, whereas the Pokemon games now have more hand-holding, better quality of life and fewer barriers to success. What do I mean by success? I mean completing the main game, completing the Pokédex and building competitive Pokemon teams. To fully understand and break down the argument, I have to look at specific Pokemon gaming elements that have evolved, changed or been altered over the years, instead of just looking at each generation of games and looking at the changes that took place. Now, XP is a good one to start off with. XP share wasn't a thing in the early generations. Well, not the way it works now. You did have XP all in Gen 1, but not like now where it's always on from the beginning. Now with XP share always on, literally from when you start the game, you can easily level up your teams, whereas in the early generations you had to do a lot of grinding and defeating wild Pokemon, which didn't really yield a lot of XP. The second way we can get XP is now through raid dens, which offer plenty of level up candies where you don't even need to battle trainers anymore to level up your Pokemon teams. The third way, and the biggest change for me, is the fact that you are now awarded XP for catching Pokemon. This just wasn't a thing in the early generation. When you caught a Pokemon, that's it, you caught a Pokemon. There was really nothing else to it. Now you get XP for catching Pokemon. Getting XP in 3 different ways and having the XP share on definitely reduces the need for grinding and has genuinely improved the quality of life and is proof of greater hand-holding in the Pokemon games. Don't forget your EVs. You get EVs from XP, so whilst you're completing your Pokédex, you're also building competitive Pokemon teams. It's just a win-win. Another big thing is your rival now picks the Pokemon that has a type disadvantage to your starter, whereas in the early generation, specifically from generation 1 to generation 4, it was tougher because your rival picked the Pokemon, the starter, that had a type advantage to the one that you picked. Now it's so much easier for this reason. Also, let's not forget the starter Pokemon that you pick has access to a stab move, so you can easily just blow away your rival. It just makes it so much easier. Having your potential ace Pokemon stronger, or well, having a type advantage to your rival's ace Pokemon definitely makes the game easier. In terms of quality of life, there have been plenty of improvements. Do we remember HMs? Finding the perfect HM slave so that you can save spots on your team for the Pokemon that you needed the most was just awful. Now with the introduction of ride Pokemon and the open world in Generation 9, this just isn't a thing anymore, thankfully. No more HM slaves, meaning no more giving up potential necessary spots on your team. Speaking of teams, having access to your Pokemon at any time, anywhere with the box link is definitely a massive quality of life improvement. We no longer need to fly back and forth to Pokemon centers, and let's not forget the nightmare of not having access to fly and having to bike across to different Pokemon centers. Yeah, that was just very awful. Having a bag as well that also easily stores away items is a big quality of life improvement, because in the early generations, some of you may not be aware, but there was a limit to how many items you could have in your bag, and this did change in the middle of generation 3, but the structure of the bag was just a massive mess. It was awful. Trust me, it was awful. Thankfully now the bag is just structured in a fantastic way where it's easy for us to find items. Now there are actually so many other factors to talk about as well, such as in the early routes of the newer Pokemon games, you have so many items available, cool items such as rare candies, whereas in the older generation of Pokemon game, you were lucky to get a couple of potions and antidotes in the early routes. What about when you're in a Pokemon battle, your moves are categorized as effective, super effective and not very effective? This is definite proof of hand holding. This just wasn't a thing before. You had to work out for yourself, which was definitely tough if you were new to Pokemon. What about your rival healing your Pokemon, before a battle? We just didn't have that. I mean, this would have been perfect to when you fought against May in Pokemon Emerald, because that was genuinely a tough Pokemon battle. In the first 3 generations, due to not having the physical special split, there were plenty of Pokemon that weren't even viable. This definitely made especially the first 3 generations a lot tougher. I mean, the thought of something like this now is just bizarre. What about late game gym leaders or Elite Four members like Hala, who had Pokemon on his team that had moves missing? Like literally he had 3 Pokemon on his team that knew 2 moves. It's just ridiculous. What about having an easy champion to beat like Geeta, whose team was just shockingly bad. What about being able to relearn moves? This is definitely a massive quality of life improvement, because starting from Pokemon Sword and Shield, you could, relearn moves by speaking to a guy at Pokemon Center. Now you can do it from your summary screen, whereas in the past this wasn't even available. But also when it was available, you had to farm heart skills, which are very rare to find. Hyper training and egg moves. This is definite hand holding, means that you don't need to do endless breeding to have a Pokemon with the perfect IVs or having access to an egg move. I mean, what happened to having tough rival battles like in Pokemon Emerald? What about facing off against tough gym leaders like Whitney in Johto, and that was just the third gym. And this introduction of Pokemon affection is just ridiculous. It's just this wasn't a thing, and now it is. Honestly, I could go into detail about so many different aspects of Pokemon gaming and how these changes have made the Pokemon games a lot easier, but all of these points that I've just mentioned, just the ones I've mentioned in the video, emphasize one thing and one thing only, and that is that Pokemon games have definitely gotten easier over the years. There is definite hand holding, a lot more than there was. There is definitely massive quality of life improvement, and honestly just fewer barriers to success. It's so much easier to complete the main game, so much easier to build competitive Pokemon teams, and so much easier to complete the Pokedex. Now, what do you guys think? Have Pokemon games gotten easier over the years? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? I want to know what you guys think. Right, that's pretty much it from me, guys. That's all I wanted to talk about in the video today. If you have enjoyed the video, please do drop a like, and if you are new to the channel, please do subscribe, where we talk about all things Pokemon gaming. I want to thank you all for watching, and hopefully I shall see you all next time.